Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, I'm going to be talking about my top 80 overall rankings in a full PPR scoring format as we approach our upcoming 2025 fantasy football drafts. Now, over the course of today's episode, I'm going to be talking about players at the running back, wide receiver, tight end, and quarterback positions, navigating us through our first 7 to 8 rounds of our upcoming 2025 fantasy football draft. Now, this is for a full PPR, and if you're looking for the subsequent rankings and my thoughts on each of these individual positions, I posted it on the channel over the course of the last couple days in regards to my top 50 running backs, top 60 wide receivers, top 32 quarterbacks, and top 30 tight ends. If you're looking for a half PPR, that's also on the channel. So for those of you interested, you can check that out. Otherwise, this is a short and sweet episode just navigating us through our early rounds. So let's go ahead and begin with the first round of our upcoming 2025 fantasy football draft. Of course, as you guys can see, I have a representation of about 5 running backs and 7 wide receivers over the course of the last decade of fantasy football in a full PPR scoring format. Based on the format itself and the full point per reception, it heavily favors the wide receiver position. Therefore, they are going to be far more valuable earlier within our drafts. But this upcoming season, I'm anticipating a 5-7 split, if not a 6-6 split by the end of this upcoming season, based on the representation that we have at the running back position. I mean, more than we have seen in just the last couple seasons, is there a really strong group of running backs in that second round that, again, many of us should be looking towards to select. Now, the question many of you guys have, Andrew, how should I be starting my draft? Should I be looking to select a wide receiver or a running back in the first round? Well, I think it really is dependent on how you want to build your team. You could go with a hero strategy where you select a stud running back in the first or second round, then follow it up with wide receivers surrounding them because of the favor that which they have within this scoring format. You could go double RB. That's definitely a potential path. Or you can go with the more balanced route of going RB wide receiver or wide receiver running back, depending on which, in fact, wide receiver or running back falls to you within the first round. I think balance is key in a full PPR. Now, if in fact you do play in a league where there's a potential of 3 starting wide receivers or 2 wide receivers and 2 flex within your starting positions, then at that point you might want to prioritize wide receiver that much more because we know they hold claim of, the top conversation within a full PPR ranking. Now, outside of that, when we look at the top 12, of course, we have Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson. I think there's a clear and away path for Jamar Chase to claim the number 1 standing once again, even though over the course of 2017 to 2024, we haven't seen the number 1 wide receiver repeat on back-to-back seasons. We've seen it in the past. I mean, we go back to Antonio Brown. Up until 2017, he had a 4-season streak of being the number 1 overall wide receiver in a full PPR in fantasy football. Now, yes, we haven't seen it as of late, and oftentimes we have seen wide receivers, unfortunately, get injured in that following year, but I think Jamar Chase, of anybody who's been able to accomplish this as of late, is going to have this highest potential opportunity to repeat. Then we have Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, and when we talk about the top at the running back position, we want running backs that, of course, are going to be highly implicated for receiving upside in order to close the gap within the wide receiver conversation in terms of total points. But in the case of Jahmyr Gibbs, technically from weeks 1 through 18 last season, he was the number 1 overall running back. For those of you who subscribe to the idea that the number 1 overall running back since 2004 hasn't been able to repeat back-to-back seasons of being number 1, Jahmyr Gibbs would technically be that situation here in 2025, as from weeks 1 through 18 last season, he had the most fantasy points. Now that I've gone ahead and talked about my top 12 overall, let's go ahead and really quickly, before we talk about the remainder of our top 80 rankings, remind you that over the course of the season, for those of you who want my all-encompassing rankings, not only to give you an edge upon your upcoming drafts this weekend, but every single Sunday morning in order to help you set your lineup by position, by tier, half PPR, full PPR, quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, kicker, defense, and flex. For those of you who are interested in getting an edge upon your league mates, be sure to travel down to the description and check out Betr. I'll be partnering with them for the entirety of this upcoming season, not only providing picks and putting my predictions to the test, but providing rankings. All you have to do is sign up using code Andrew today, make that first-time deposit minimum of $10, and make a one-time minimum play of $1 within the Betr Picks section, picking more or less on given player statistics. Once all 3 of those steps have been completed, you'll be on my email list and you'll be receiving emails every single week up until week 18 of this season. So be sure to check your spam folder and, of course, take advantage of the opportunity. Check out the map to the right side of the screen to determine your eligibility based on your current location. And, of course, all that information is down below in the description. And new users who sign up today get a free $10. So take advantage of the opportunity via Betr. Thank you very much for all the support. All right, let's continue on by talking about tiers C through E. Now, when we get into this conversation, there are running backs such as Achane, Brown, Irving, Henry, Taylor, and Jacobs, who are honestly, in my mind, just too difficult to pass up on when given the opportunity of selecting them within the second round. Even if you do start with a running back in round 1 in the form of a Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Ashton Genty, in the back end of the first, the opportunity of selecting one of these other running backs is far too valuable based on what kind of fantasy point totals they were putting forth last season and what they're potentially eligible to performing this upcoming season. Now, again, if you wanted to lean towards the safer route of avoiding the potential of running back injuries and all that is entailed with that singular position, you could look for a double wide receiver pickup, especially if you're given an opportunity at the back end of the first round to have yourself Neighbors and or Puka Nacua on the same team in a full PPR. At that point, you can't ignore it. You have to take the value. But as of right now, when you have the opportunity of selecting one of these stud running backs in round 2, oftentimes I'm looking in the directions in comparison to a Drake London, Nico Collins, or Brock Bowers. Now, speaking of Brock Bowers, this is the first time a tight end has been, of course, presented here in a full PPR format. Now, in a full PPR, specifically Bowers and McBride could easily go as early as 18 overall or 22 overall. And that's why I have them within these tier blocks, because I certainly do believe they're capable of being able to present enough fantasy value and once again put up very similar numbers to 2023, in which both of these tight ends ranked as 18 and 23. So again, they could very easily rank up into that position. But the reason why they were able to achieve such a high standing is because these other positions, wide receiver, running back, find themselves finding more injuries on a per year basis in comparison to the top tier tight ends. Now, again, George Kittle is a very rare instance, but when we talk about someone like Travis Kelce, who has been year over year the number 1 overall tight end over the course of his entire legendary career here, he hasn't really found himself missing games due to injury. So when we talk about a Brock Bowers or Trey McBride, they're not going to miss time, and that makes them a little bit more of a safer selection within these rounds, especially considering they are wide receivers. The statistics in which they are gathering are receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. And Brock Bowers and Trey McBride in 2024 had the 3rd and 4th most receptions amongst all players in the league, which continues to grant them even more value. And when we talk about flex representation of tight ends within the top 25. Over the course of the last 10 years, we have seen 17 tight ends rank within the top 23 of the flex position in terms of end of season rankings. So on an average of, 1.7 per season, hopefully we'll see 2 top 23 tight ends this year in the form of Brock Bowers and Trey McBride, as they're both certainly capable of accomplishing that. Now, before we move on to the next grouping, we have Josh Allen here at number 26. And I think that there is a justification to selecting him in the back end of the second round, beginning of the third round, because of his consistency. Because 5 years in a row, he has been the number 1 or number 2 ranked quarterback in fantasy football. There is an absolute justification, because there's a guarantee for him to deliver, to be in the conversation of selecting him this upcoming season within your potential third round. Now, if you're going to start with a running back, quarterback combo, I think there's a little bit more risk involved in comparison to going with a balanced set of Jamar Chase number 1, following up with the best available running back in round 2, and then selecting a Josh Allen in round 3 to have that balance, so that once rounds 4 and 5 come along, you're not in a position to where you must select one of those 2 positions. Otherwise, you'll be in a really bad spot. Now, let's go ahead and let's represent the rest of the top 44 with the following. Again, in a similar sense in what we just talked about Josh Allen, we want to prioritize positional advantages in round 3/4. Now, in this case, we're talking about Lamar Jackson in the middle of the third round, potentially even George Kittle at the back end of the third, beginning of the fourth, where we'll also be able to introduce players like Jaden Daniels and Jalen Hurts within tier H. These are all players that have incredible value, that if in fact you start with a balanced set of running back, wide receiver, and the best available players that are up on the board are players that you believe can potentially even be drafted later in that fourth round, you can opt for taking Kittle in the third and get that positional play in the fourth between a running back or a wide receiver. It just depends on how you are navigating your draft. You could very easily just go about drafting a tight end in the third in the form of George Kittle, then following up with Jalen Hurts or Jaden Daniels in the fourth, assuming you started with a wide receiver, running back, kind of split balance combo there within the back end of your first rounds. Now, when we look at these tiers, we're talking about Alvin Kamara, Tyreek Hill, Kyren Williams, Lamar Jackson inhabiting the F tier. I mean, these are players that across the board have been consistent year over year, especially Alvin Kamara and Tyreek Hill within this top tier conversation. Kyren Williams, of course, back-to-back seasons of being in this top 10 running back conversation. Lamar Jackson has the highest ceiling of upside amongst all quarterbacks in the league. And then we get into a wide receiver kind of mix of Mike Evans, T. Higgins, Devontae Adams, studs across the boards that are veterans that we know are going to deliver. Of course, we have James Cook, Omarion Hampton. And you may be thinking to yourself, Andrew, I would take Omarion Hampton significantly earlier than a lot of these other receiving options that are available. But I am purely basing this off of fantasy point per game averages that I'm anticipating to see, and the fact that the other alternative options that I've mentioned before, I'm expecting to score more points than him this upcoming season. But as we continue on, of course, we mentioned Kittle, Daniels, and Hurts within this H tier, and then we close out with either running backs who have themselves a lot of receiving potential in terms of Kenneth Walker and Travion Henderson, who both are going to be highly implicated for receptions, along with receivers who are more likely going to be a touchdown threat rather than a high reception count over the course of this upcoming season with DK Metcalf, Terry McLaurin, and of course, Teteroa McMillan. Now let's continue on, and before I do so, quick reminder for those of you who want my 2025 fantasy football draft guide, rankings, and ask me unlimited questions and get community Discord server access, all of that is available via the Patreon. You can find that link down in the description. All of my blood, sweat, and tears have been poured into this draft guide. Additionally, on top of that, all the rankings that you would get via the Betr sign up, and all three of those steps are all available via the Patreon alongside of super flex rankings for those of you who play in a 2QB league going into this upcoming weekend. Additionally, on top of that, of course, you can ask me unlimited questions, send me messages, and of course, join the Discord community server that is private. So for those of you who are interested, take advantage of that opportunity. Greatly appreciate all the support in that regard. Thank you. All right, let's continue on with the 45 through 52 range, pretty much the end of the fourth round and the beginning of the fifth round. And in this case, for those of you who potentially did not select a running back early, or at least went with the potential hero RB approach, you might want to potentially invest in a James Conner or a Chuba Hubbard, two running backs who were incredible last year. And I understand James Conner has his injury risk, but when you're averaging over 16 fantasy points as a running back year over year here, and Chuba Hubbard, of course, was a dominant force from weeks 3 through 16 prior to his injury, I mean, these are opportunities in which you are not going to be able to pass on if, in fact, you need a running back. Because after these two, there's a pretty significant drop-off. And there's a couple tiers separating them from the rest of the pack. And we'll get into that in just a moment. But in the case of which you went double RB to begin with, or potentially took positional advantages at tight end and subsequently quarterback, looking at players like Xavier Worthy, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, and Ricky Pearsall can certainly bail you out throughout this range because, again, these are wide receivers that you could play the ADP game and wait for them later on in your draft, especially guys like Ridley and Pearsall who are often ignored that are going to have major seasons here in 2025. Then we continue on with Breece Hall. Tony Pollard, like I mentioned again, I think there's a significant drop-off between guys like Connor Hubbard in comparison to Hall, Pollard, and the potential of Harvey, Swift. Again, not too many running backs in this range. This becomes a really heavy threat of wide receivers that are incredibly worth it within that fifth round. Because when you have the services of a Zay Flowers, Devontae Smith, Jamison Williams, Rome Odunze, these are players that are going to be, sure, either the number one of their offense or the number two in a heavy, high-powered scoring offense that is going to be able to get them enough looks to be relevant for fantasy purposes. In the case of a Devontae Smith, Jamison Williams, Rome Odunze, who, yes, are the number twos, but still are going to find themselves incredible value. Then we also present the idea of selecting Mr. Joe Burrow. Joe Burrito at number 55. So here's the thing about Joe Burrow. Last season from weeks 5 through 18 was averaging 23.5 fantasy points per game. That kind of production in a 4-point per passing touchdown league is incredible. And I think there's so much potential for upside, especially this upcoming year, if the Bengals can start on fire. If they can start on fire and their defense continues to play as bad as they have year over year, the expectation is that Burrow should be able to light this league on fire and is absolutely worth a fifth-round selection. And as we continue on, we continue to address the wide receiver position at a premium as guys like Rashee Rice, Waddle, Egbuka, Golden, Travis Hunter, the rookie spread of receivers there from 65 to 67 can very easily bail you out if you did not invest early enough in wide receiver, as all of these players should be able to crush their current ADPs. And basically where I have them ranked, I expect them to crush those numbers. It's just a matter of who's going to get injured ahead of them. The other receivers I have projected more than them, but it's just a matter of who's going to miss time going into this upcoming season. And typically, we don't really see rookie wide receivers in the first round miss significant volumes of time, even though we have year over year, like Ricky Pearsall missed some time last season. We have seen Jamison Williams in his rookie year miss some time. But hopefully, these guys can stay healthy and ball out as they're expected to do so. Now we're going to close out our top 80 with the following, where we'll reintegrate some tight ends in the form of Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce, and David Njoku. In a full PPR scoring format, Travis Kelce is incredibly valuable. He was number 3 amongst all tight ends last season in terms of total receptions. Considering the 6-game suspension of Rashee Rice, who again sits there at number 63, there is so much potential for value for Travis Kelce to start his season on fire and then continue that momentum for the remainder of the year. Again, last season had a career low 3 receiving touchdowns. Considering how many targets he had within the red zone, I think those numbers are going to go up, and he is going to be incredibly valuable as to where he is being selected in comparison to seasons prior. Then, of course, Laporta, David Njoku, 2 of my favorite potential tight ends to draft this upcoming season, especially as the Lions are expected to throw the ball more this season, and David Njoku will be the number 1 receiving threat of one Joe Flacco for potentially, I would say, 6 to 10 weeks here to begin the 2025 season. And then we'll also have other running backs that are in this mix after the wave of wide receivers have gone. Isaiah Pacheco, Tracy, David Montgomery, Aaron Jones, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, again, JCM. A lot of value to be had there. And then we have Bo Nix and Baker Mayfield. These are potential options that, again, once we get to round 7 and 8, I think they are justifiably great selections there. Now, again, you could punt on the position and look forward to drafting a quarterback or potentially 2 quarterbacks later on in your draft. I truly do believe that the values they present at picks 79 and 80 is worth it, especially considering where this Broncos offense is going with an ascending Bo Nix, where Baker Mayfield has been throwing 40-plus touchdowns last year. But not only that, he was able to accomplish that without Chris Godwin healthy, at times without Cade Otton healthy, and at times with Jalen McMillan last season not even producing. So even though all 3 of those players are dealing with injuries, there was a huge sequence of games last year between weeks 6 through like 17 where he had a lot of missing threats within this offense. And yet he was still at the top of the quarterback conversation and very well could once again accomplish that here in 2025. All right, that's going to cover it in regards to my PPR top 80 overall rankings. I do appreciate y'all supporting the channel. If you enjoyed today's content, click the like button, subscribe to the channel as we're making daily fantasy football content for the entirety of the season in order to help you capture a 2025 fantasy football championship. And by subscribing today, not only will you gain an edge upon your league mates with the upcoming videos of waiver wire, running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback rankings, etc., all that with the upcoming live streams every single Sunday morning. Not only will you gain an edge upon your league mates, but you'll help us get one step closer to achieving our goal of 100,000 subscribers. Thank you very much. That's going to cover for me today. Good luck on your upcoming drafts, and until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.